So if you've been around this channel long enough, you'll know that I tend to recommend two books. The first is Paint Your Town Red. And as I've said multiple times before, if you're paying attention to what's going on in your local areas, especially if you've got a Labour council, you'll notice that some of the policies that they're doing are incredibly socialist. Indeed, the mayor, the Labour candidate that was chosen and selected by Labour members and is going and standing for this position is an open socialist. So one book I always recommend to anyone, even if you've left the Labour Party because of Keir Starmer or something like that, buy this book. It's absolutely fantastic and shows you what you can do to get, socialist policies going forward. And here's the thing, they work. They're working right now in Preston. The other book that I always often recommend, because it's quite a good history book as well, is a book called where is it? No, I haven't got it, but never mind. I should have got it for me. It's called 1,000 Years of Annoying the French. And if you see the book in France, it's called 1,000 Years of Annoying the English. But again, it's a very good, not only is it a very good history book, but also tells the story of the relationship between the UK and France. And it is very, very good. Not only is it very good, it's very funny. If you're into history, or even if you're not into history, I always recommend it because it's one of those really good history books that is written in a way that it isn't written like other history books. It's not really dry as some history books really are. And from someone who reads a lot of history books, I can definitely attest that is quite true. But the reason we are asking this today is what is next for the next stage of the relationships between the UK and France after Brexit? Are we friends? Are we foes, or are we something a bit in between? So before we do get into that and trying to answer that question, let's have a look at not have a look. Yes, hit that like, share, hit that like, share, and subscribe button. Obviously, if you're new and whatnot, and of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do support the channel that way. So on with today's article then. So this comes from the Yorkshire Bylines with the title of France and the UK after Brexit, Friends or Foes? The historical ties between Britain and France are long and complex, and that's putting it mildly. We've had a lot to put up with here. The Norman Conquest, the 100 Years' War, General de Gaulle and his famous No, and a language that presents a very tough challenge for the British stiff upper lip. And the French have also suffered indignities, can't say it, of course, Agincourt and Waterloo. Of course, as well as the storming of the Académie Française barricades by a host of Anglicals, and for example, the fair under brainstorming, for which we can also only apologise. Also, although through Scotland and France were old allies, mostly in cahoots against the English, Britain as a whole only created and settled friendly ties with France back in 1904 with the signing of the Entente Cordiale, in which we were on the same side in two wars, when France was very reluctant and was overcome, and Britain's suspicion was finally conquered. We eventually became very close partners in now what we call the EU. And then, of course, came Brexit. So what is next? Are we to be friends or foes? This was the question addressed in the latest online event run by the UK EUK Forum. And speakers were the Lord Patrick Rickers and, of course, the former British ambassador to Paris, and Seville Brennan, the former French ambassador in London, with Denis McShane, the former Labour Minister for Europe, in the chair. Sadly, the consensus was that while we may not be enemies exactly, we are not friends either. Min Mabel's view was that after the divorce, there was not likely to be a very mutual consent. We are now in a period of acrimony, in which she was very in agreement with Lord Ricketts' take that it will take years rather than months to repair this damage. Each speaker was asked to name at least 3 things that people in their country will find very hard to understand about each other. For Madame Bremen, It was the British decision to join in the invasion of Iraq, the UK's suspicion of any joint European defence initiative, and of course, Brexit. Lord Ricketts drew attention to obviously the two countries' very different ways of pushing tradecraft. Firstly, he mentioned the capacity, of course, the French foreign language to launch grand initiatives on the world. Totally, of course, lacking in detail and causing problems for others by very creative and attractive. Secondly, he named the French willingness to take risks, for example, quickly putting together big international conferences where the Brits could only agonize for weeks over the details and miss the boat. His final frustration was the fact that the French diplomatic service was just so good. Madame Le Bremen mentioned her shock, of course, at the Brexit referendum result, when she'd been assured by everyone that we would remain. This was, of course, followed by some discussion of the reasons as to why this came about. Lord Ricketts did felt that the constitution system that had failed. MPs were not picking up, of course, on the popular anger and therefore not feeding this information back to the centre. Dennis McShane did felt that there was indeed a lack of knowledge about Europe in the government after Blair. And of course, Lord Ricketts did add this mismatch between some British politicians as views of the UK's place in the world and the reality, and by ourselves that we are no longer a great power. This lack of understanding does lead to an illusion of influence. He and Madame Bremen did agree that the UK has soft power, advantages, for example, in our language, culture, and universities, for both pointed out that this has so far to be backed up with the appropriate policies. In regard, Lord Ricketts did suggest the current focus on sovereignty is not very helpful. The Lord does not see any ray of light, unfortunately. The arrival of perhaps in a decade, perhaps of a new generation of politicians who grew up with the Erasmus and, of course, EasyJet. We are unlikely to rejoin the EU, he felt, but with new people in charge, we will be able to work towards an can't even say it, an amenable relationship. Meanwhile, we need to foster some very goodwill at the people to people level, of course, pleading a change in, of course, the political weather. A very worthy ambition, but this Madame Bremen did draw the attention to something that could stand in the way. The lack of foreign language skills among British people. This is more likely, she said, to lead to further isolation than to help forge friendships and understanding. For those of us studying French in the 60s and 70s, French has had an enormous allure. Although to make us struggle through the verbs and get our mouths around the accent, we were determined to get ourselves over to Paris, eat the excellent croissants left on the left bank, and try to pick up tips from the effortlessly stylish French girls. And of course, this was all good, and in many ways was different, as we thought it would be. And of course, to our surprise, we found it more conformist country than Britain. And there was always a right way to do things, but there was always a lively openness in discussion. Indeed, it soon became clear that the worst fault one could have was not having an opinion on something. We also felt that the left traces on our own way of life after our studies and years in abroad. Maybe our greater sense of individual leeway and our ability to laugh at ourselves. This creation of kind of mutual understanding and rapport with people of a different culture is a very huge life experience, and it's the ability to speak a language that does enable it. And to lose that capacity for a country with which we share so much history would be tragic. Unfortunately, it does seem that we're to be on different paths. And we have seemingly unstoppable decline, of course, the uptake of qualifications in French and indeed in German in school. Ending of the Erasmus scheme in the UK, and of course, a very anti-EU government. It's hard to disagree with Madame Bremen. It's going to be an uphill struggle to keep the Entente Cordiale alive, even at the people-to-people level. However, with so much to admire in each other and so much to gain from pooling our different strengths, it is all to be in our own interest if Lord Ricketts' optimism is to be well founded. The forum understandably did focus on the challenges of the new relationship with France, or lack thereof. It is to be hoped that, of course, future sessions will help us remind us why it's worth preserving. So that's the ultimate take of way of all this. And again, part of it is the current crop of MPs. There's no two ways around it. There are some very, very anti-European MPs put in the moment, but of course that has been, of course, due to the very much the infiltration of UKIP into the Conservative Party that has ultimately caused this. Um, and it will take, again, a new generation of MPs, really, I think, to both heal that, not only just on the Conservative side, but in the Labour side as well. And again, fighting to, again, eventually rejoin the EU, because, again, it only makes sense economically for us to be in the EU. We've been out almost, a year and a bit at the moment. And already we've seen from a couple of economic studies that, again, it hasn't been good. I've always said right from the very beginning, our path back to the EU has already been pretty much laid out for us to walk on down. So it's just a matter of time, really, when this happens. But of course, as we've said before, you've got a government that likes to talk about Brexit opportunities but can't actually name any, and has to have a minister for Brexit opportunities who's had to go out and ask the public what Brexit opportunities are. So again, it's very bizarre over here. I'm not going to lie at the moment. But as always, thank you very much to all those people again for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, we'll see you all next time.